Hello.
Hi, Judy.
Hi.
Judy.
Did we have a sign-up list?
Yeah, but it's only gas company, EP, and SPS. I invited more than those few parties to the meeting, so we'll see who shows up and who wants to talk.
I wish staff isn't. Hopefully they'll show up.
Yeah, their staff's in the waiting room. I'm going to admit everyone at 1 o'clock.
Okay. Do you want me to call on people? If so, I would need the sign-up list.
However you want to do it, I'll send you the sign-up list so you can see.
Okay. I can also participants. Okay.
I just sent it to you, Judy.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to admit all the parties in the waiting room.
Okay.
Hi, Judy.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Seems like the audio is working.
Yeah. Just making sure that everyone who wants to be admitted is admitted. Is everyone admitted, Robert?
So far, yes.
Okay. Well,
Commissioner
it's
is joining now.
oh good. I was about to start, but I'll wait. Is Commissioner admitted?
There.
Yes.
Okay. Hi,
Okay, I
everyone.
didn't want to start until you got on. Oh my gosh, if that's coffee, you're gonna be really hyped up for this.
Diet Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Okay, well,
Don't tell anyone, but I learned to love this in my days in Texas.
it's okay. Thirst quench. Yeah, it's been so hot and it's been so dry here lately. The only thing that seems to work is bubbles. But it is 1:04 and I would like to start the workshop in 21-00177. This was scheduled. The NOPR was issued in case number 21-00177 in the matter of a commission rulemaking regarding NMPRC Rule 17.5.440 NMAC extensions, improvements, additions, and cooperative agreements between or among utilities, and 17.9.572 NMAC location of large capacity plants and transmission lines. We received initial comments, and I would like to open up the workshop with staff, if that's possible, going through their comments and explaining them and the reasons for them. Is that okay, Commissioner?
That's great.
Who will be speaking on behalf of staff?
I guess I will as soon as I can find our comments.
I can send them to you if,
Wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it. That might be faster.
yeah, okay, hold on.
And it looks to me like staff's the only non-attorneys in the room, with the exception of the commissioner.
Yeah, that's fine because this is rulemaking. So here you go. I believe you signed and submitted the comments on behalf of staff.
Yes, Tim, Eli, and myself signed them.
Okay. And I also, is Eli present?
Eli and Tim are both here, yes.
Yeah, so they could also chime in. It doesn't have to just be, this is a workshop, so. It's fine if Eli and Tim have anything to add to what you have to say.
Okay. Well, I guess we get down here, one effective date. It's just like that's just saying when the date is effective, when the amendments are published. Modification for related to extensions, system improvements, maintenance, etc. And then our first big suggestion is to change in 0.7b is to change the word under definition of undertaking to relevant project throughout the rule.
And do you have a definition of relevant project, or you just, staff just
I think
feel
it's in the rule.
that that's a more appropriate term? Is that? Is that the issue?
Yeah, I think just relevant project is more direct than undertaking.
Okay,
My that was one of my suggestions, and my basic thought process was just that when you see the term undertaking come up later on in the rule, it doesn't really stick out as much as being that it's supposed to signify that it meets these certain qualifications, where the definition of undertaking is basically supposed to include these restrictions on what exact type of undertaking it is. And I just think that with that relevant project, if you see that later in the rule, it kind of makes it clear that this is a project that has met these specifications that we've set.
okay. I think I understand.
Hi, Eli, this is Robert Lundeen with Commissioner Fishman's executive assistant. Is the purpose of that change just kind of better semantically? Is that what you're saying?
That's basically it. Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay,
even
thank you.
adding like a clarifying objective or something to undertaking, I think would accomplish the same thing. It's basically just so that if you're reading through the rule, if you see just the word undertaking by itself, it wouldn't necessarily stick out to you that that's supposed to have specific kind of connotations along with it.
Okay, if there aren't any other comments, your next comment was regarding 8A1E to delete the entire paragraph because it's outside the scope of the rule.
Okay, we didn't believe a sale, power pooling, interchange, stuff like that has anything to do with building facilities.
Has anything to do with what? I didn't hear your last,
Building facilities.
but this is not a change. That was in the previous or current version.
Okay, that wasn't a change, okay.
Yeah, and I was just curious as to,
I mean, well, we read that and didn't really feel like that was, that was in the spirit of,
that's in the current rule. That's all I'm saying.
Hi, this is Robert again. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you guys pointing out maybe some deficiencies with the existing language. Maybe a bit more explanation of why. I guess understand that it might not be fitting, but it's been in the rule since 2013, is it? So has it been an issue in the past 9 years?
not that I'm aware of. That's what, I mean, that was another reason to wonder whether that was really something that needed to be there. I mean, all the 440s I've seen has all just been, reconductoring power lines, doing something with substations, things like that. Nothing like this.
Okay, well, yeah, I appreciate your comment, and maybe other people can, when it's their turn, can chime in, or if any of the utilities know if they've used that portion of the rule in the past. Yeah, it's interesting.
I've got a question. Is that, are those potentially capital costs? Robert, you may have the answer on that.
I mean, not that I'm aware of, no, but that may not be.
I guess my thought is if it's potentially a capital cost, then it may belong there. If it's not, then your take on it may be correct, Jack.
I mean, I don't expect that anything there would actually be a capital cost because most of this stuff wouldn't be involved in building facilities. But they'd be more like a PPI. I mean, I would think that something like this would be more appropriate in the PPA rule. Because, you know, CO, PowerPoint, you know, that's more PPA related stuff.
Mhm. Well,
I agree
So-
that it does seem out of place.
so we're thinking about, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this to our attention. And yeah, it'd be nice to further, get further comments and suggestions. Can we-
Judy,
Yeah.
sorry, this is Leslie Padilla. We can, I'm with PNM. We can certainly look back at our filings and see if we have made filings under that provision of the rule.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see whether it's ever been utilized. And get some feel for why it was in there in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, could we move on to staff's comment regarding 448D1?
I think we missed A3.
A3. Oh, okay. Hold on. I see. That seemed a little stylistic to me, but is there something more to it? You said, oh, things are not currently on file. Maps are not currently on file with the commission. So you suggested,
Well, we don't necessarily have maps, or at least up-to-date maps of existing facilities. I know it's been in years past, it's been tough to actually get them because of because of security issues, basically.
yeah,
And we didn't want to get something in here where they had to make a choice between following the rule or following security protocols. And, we felt that in an instance, if we had to see a map or something, that we just go to the utilities offices and look at them there, which would certainly bypass any question of security issues. Because as you know, once something is given to us, it becomes free to the public.
yes, that's true.
And so that prevents any kind of a violation of any kind of like a NERC security issue or FERC security issue or whatever. I mean, that was the biggest reason for that change, was just to avoid trying to force the utility to give us something that somebody else says they can't.
Has that ever been an issue?
Not that I'm aware of since I've been here now.
Do we have maps on file?
We have some maps. Well, I should say we had some maps. I don't know where they are anymore. But PNM had provided us with a general transmission map, but nothing that got into any kind of explicit details. And we had some maps that had WEC systems on it, things like that, SPP maps that were just general overviews, but nothing specific.
Because I know that in cases where IOUs want a location approval or right-of-way approval, they often have maps attached to them. Oh, in
But
fact,
they don't really have maps that are extremely descriptive of their existing system usually. You know,
right.
usually they're just maps says, okay, we're gonna start here, go there, go over here, go up here, go down here, and end up over here. You know, they're usually not terribly explicit other than with a general route.
So basically, you don't want them to submit maps.
I mean, I don't, I know that there are security issues with FERC and NERC, and I can't quote any of them. But I know that, you know, I know that there are issues. I mean, basically, you don't want a terrorist getting their hands on it.
Right, but as I said, they already attach maps to location approval and right-of-way cases. They could attach those kinds of maps, right?
Yeah, I mean, and they do, and a lot of times they do in the 440s. You know, they'll put a section on the map and just say that it's gonna, this is the general route it's gonna take. I mean, general maps, but you know, this doesn't say general maps, this says system maps.
Okay, well, I hear what you're saying, and maybe we can work on that. Does anyone else have any comments about maps?
It may be good to hear from the utilities in response comments to staff
Yeah.
paragraph 5.
Yeah. But from a commissioner standpoint, it seems to me as we're going forward with grid mod and doing all kinds of work on the distribution system in particular, but transmission as well going forward, that while we may not want, for security reasons, the maps being published, we should have some provision in there that the commission, that clearly gives the commission access to system maps if it's required in order to evaluate a particular proposal or project. And so it seems to me we should have some kind of language that specifies how that would happen. So please comment on if that makes sense to everybody or not.
I think I agree with Robert. We can hear from the utilities when it's their chance to talk. If staff could move on to 8D1.
Yeah, we can do that. That's certainly, I mean, that's just something that can be talked about and looked at and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to delve into and
You're right, that would be best handled by the utilities because they're the ones that have to face those rules, not us.
right. They know what they can't reveal and what they can reveal better than we do.
Okay, and on D1, basically we were putting an exception in there in the event of unplanned emergency maintenance or repairs and give them, say that they have to file the report not more than 30 days because, you know, we don't want them saying, well, we can't start maintenance or repairs of this line for 45 days after we file a 440 to do it. But it does put a limit on them as to having to file one by 30 days after.
Right. So you're saying the general rule, it would be 45 days prior to the commencement of construction.
In the way that reads, if a line's blown down in a windstorm, they've got to hold off for 40 days to file that 440. And obviously you can't have that if you've got customers without power.
Well, I hear what you're saying. Does anyone else have any comments?
Judy, Leslie Padilla again on behalf of PNM. You know, while our comments actually expressed other issues with the a firm timeline deadline, if the commission is going to leave such a deadline in the rule, absolutely we need an exception for emergencies.
And Judy, this is Mike D'Antoni with Xcel Energy. We have similar comments to staffs, again, making allowances for emergency situations. So we're in agreement with that.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Commissioner Fishman, do you have any questions?
No, makes sense.
Okay, well, then I think we can probably move on. We're on 8D3B.
Okay, the reason for that is basically this is if they have to do a certified mail with return receipt to another utility that they're going to be approaching, it requires them to file the return receipt with us. And basically all our change here is just a requirement to tell us what the heck the return receipt's for. Because I've had that, they showed up in my mailbox. There's just a return receipt, nothing. I had a stack of return receipts sitting on a shelf on my bookshelf that I didn't know what to do with because I didn't know what they were for. And basically all we're saying is, please identify what 440 that goes to.
Yeah, and I wonder whether certified mail is even necessary when you could just have a PDF of an email.
Well, then it might, if that's the case, might want to revisit the whole number 3.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, it just, our procedural rules now allow for electronic filing, and as a certificate of service is the cover sheet that shows who it was served to and when it was done. It might make sense to just revamp whole certified mail idea, but just a thought. Does anybody else have any ideas about certified mail being obsolete?
I have a comment. This is Nancy with EPE.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I think that the certified mail requirement is to notify the other utilities that are within the half mile.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Right. And I'm just questioning whether it needed to be by certified mail and whether it could be by email with another proof of service. The way, since all court filings now are done that way, commission filings are done that way too.
That makes sense.
Robert and Commissioner, what do you think?
Yeah, you're making sense to me.
I would just add that since this is an issue that comes up between utilities, and maybe they just address it in their response comments, that'd be appreciated.
That's a good idea. Okay, next.
Okay, 9D2B is basically the same issue on the gas side.
Okay.
Okay, and then we go to, let me scroll back up here. Okay, on 440.8F, we just feel that cost recovery is a rate case issue, not a 440 issue.
Okay. Any comments, other comments on that point?
Jack, so what's your proposal there? I don't have that comment in front of me.
Basically just remove F totally.
And F requires what exactly?
F is basically cost recovery.
That's a little more specific, please.
Okay, one is actual cost associated with the undertaking exceeding 100%.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Robert, you could put the rule up.
Yeah,
Oh.
thank you.
You're one step ahead of me. Okay. It's F. There's 4 parts.
Okay. Okay, so go ahead, Jack.
Okay, basically, through all of this, they're talking about exceeding 100% of the estimated cost, but less than 150%. Our feeling with that was all of that stuff was stuff that should be determined in a rate case, not in a 440 filing. I mean, if for no other reason, that would tend to encourage padding of the estimates. Potentially.
So I know what I was struggling with and thinking about when this was written into this rule was the fact that oftentimes what we see in the 440, the dollar estimates are many times greater or smaller than the actual costs that are finally incurred.
Well,
Yeah.
Commissioner, some of the ones that I've looked into that were larger than that was because the 440 excludes the cost of transformers. Like there was one of them, and I don't remember which one it was, but they provided the cost of doing it without the transformer as per the form. And it turned out the transformer was like a $16 million transformer, and that accounted for the entire cost of the entire cost difference, because the transformer was excluded from 440, but it was included in the rates, in the rate case.
Well, so the point I was getting to, the big point for me is we need to, if the numbers come in so differently, instead of informing folks, the 440 can inadvertently misinform folks. And,
No, I mean, okay.
Let me finish the thought. And my thought is whatever we need to do to fix that and be sure that the numbers match up, we should do. And maybe you have another suggestion about how to do that.
Okay, the one suggestion that I was thinking of, Commissioner, was taking that exception for not including transformers out of the form and have like cost of extension, cost of transformer, cost of service. Because initially the rule 440 was just used for extending customer service lines, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
And
is there a reason to exclude transformers?
well, I think this has been in since the very beginning. I think they put that in to try to equalize the cost between different utilities, because obviously SPS can buy a transformer cheaper than Roosevelt County Co-op because they buy so many of them. And that was to more even out. I think that was more to give a more even picture of what the cost of the line extension was.
Right.
But, but like I said, we could, you could break that out in a new form, which I think this rule needs. And say, okay, cost of line extension, cost of transformer, cost of service, and just add the stuff in that was excluded in the old form. Because that would have covered that $16 million change.
So I'm open for, other comments from the utilities and anyone else.
Judy and Commissioner Fishman, Leslie Padilla on behalf of PNM. PNM addressed this this question fairly extensively in our written comments. So we agree with staff that it's not appropriate to include cost recovery provisions. Particularly the provision that would disallow costs entirely without due process. But more generally, what PNM was thinking would be helpful in this workshop is, maybe not to just get into everyone's comments because we can all read those, but for PNM, it would actually be helpful to know what the drafters of the changes were thinking, and what they were looking at in terms of the previous filings, because we've all submitted a lot of documentation and information in this proceeding over the last year. What the drafters were looking at when they inserted these provisions and what the goal is, because I think with that information, maybe we would be able to address more constructively in response comments, different approaches to addressing concerns. The NOPR itself, at least in my view, didn't really provide much explanation for all the various provisions of the rule. For example, the addition of the term maintenance. There's no explanation in the NOPR for it. So there's little basis in my view in the NOPR for many of the changes in the rule, especially given the pretty extensive comments that we and the other participants have made already in this docket.
Okay, so from the other standpoint that we were looking at it was, rather than saying, okay, if it exceeds 150, it shall be presumed imprudent. Maybe it would be more proper to say that the utility has to positively justify that in the rate case. Why was it 150% more? Maybe they ran into construction. Maybe they had to use a helicopter instead of a line truck. Maybe they ran into something that they had no idea they were going to run into. And rather than put construction off and shut it down and wait till they can do another 440, they do that. Because if they remove the crews out of an area for 45 days for the 440, it costs some money to get back in there. It's sort of like doing 4-lane highway instead of a 2. A 4-lane highway isn't twice as expensive as a 2-lane if it's all done at once. Yes, it's more expensive, but it's not twice as expensive. Because the road crews and the equipment's already there.
So you're saying if you left F1 in to change the wording to, rather than saying shall be presumed imprudent, just state that the utility has the burden to prove that they were prudent.
That would be my suggestion, would be just to have something in there that says, okay, if they exceed the estimated cost by, you probably should give them a little leeway, maybe 10%, that they have to positively justify why they exceeded that cost in the rate case.
Robert and Commissioner, do you have any comments on that?
I would just remind everyone to read subpart F and subpart E in harmony together. So if a utility, would only encounter issues under subpart F if they weren't dutifully amending their 440 reports pursuant to subpart E. But one of the issues, and I think Ms. Padilla asked about underlying issues and intent, was that, the 440 rule there's no consequences related to any, failure by the utility to properly file these. So that's just one of the kind of underlying intentional ideas.
But Robert, getting here, looking in paragraph E2, it says it shall amend a report at least 15 days prior to commencement of a construction of the extension. What if they're working on the extension and they find a problem? They can't very well change their report 15 days before they started the construction.
So yeah, that would need to be changed prior to
Well,
discovering.
That's just in relation to the undertaking's altered character or purpose.
So they're just going to put everything on hold for 15 days while they sit there and file a 440 amendment, is what you're saying. Meanwhile, they've got their equipment sitting out there. They've got their crews sitting out there twiddling their thumbs and things like that. I mean, because this says they have to do it 15 days ahead of time. Why not just let them use their judgment, do it, and then come in the rate case and say, okay, we exceeded this estimate because of this problem.
I think you might be conflating E1 and E2 together, but yeah, I'll just propose that you just read that again. It's about the character or purpose or an alternative. So it's if they kind of change the 440 project, like the substance of it.
Well, without trying to reword stuff here, I think that it's pretty clear we don't want to create the kind of problems Jack is raising, and that we better be sure we word it to create an understanding that the reporting is not in place to delay or make more expensive undertakings that need to be done. But I'll just reiterate the idea that my major concern is that we should be able to reconcile the costs that come through the 440 to what actually might eventually come forward in a rate case, and that it might even be after the project's completed. I'm open to all kinds of ways of doing it. But even after the project is completed, you might do an update. And that certainly comments along those lines or about how we do that are welcome. And if we can, simplify it, make it a little more easy to understand and avoid those kind of bureaucratic potential hangups, all comments would be terrifically constructive along those lines. Does that make sense to you, Robert?
But I mean, doing it in doing it in the rate case, I mean, all we need to do is say that the utility has to specifically address that in the rate case, rather than trying to bury it into something else.
The utilities have to affirmatively, prove the prudence of their additions to rate base in the rate case. So that's kind of already taken for granted.
And Jack, I do think it's helpful if that process is happening as we go instead of waiting for a rate case, because that means all stakeholders can have access to that information and a better idea of where things are headed. And it's work that has to be done anyway. So why let it go stale? If there are counter arguments to that, put them in the comments, but that's kind of my initial reaction.
Well, at any rate, that was just our take on this section of the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and I just want to mention that Commissioner Hall has joined. Are you there, Commissioner Hall? I thought I saw her join. Yes.
Sorry to
Commissioner-
show up late.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to acknowledge you and
Thank you.
let you know that we are on 448F cost recovery, and Robert is doing screen sharing, so it's on your screen.
That's the cost recovery paragraph. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Thanks.
Okay. And have you heard staff's comments?
I did.
regarding-
I
Okay,
did. I tend to agree. Go ahead.
They
I'm sorry.
they suggested deleting it.
They what?
They suggested in their comments deleting the cost recovery, and I think Ms. Padilla from P&M agreed.
I see. Thanks for filling me in.
Okay. Jack, do you want to keep going?
yeah, we can go. I think we're a 9A3. And this one is basically doing with, says reports shall include sufficient information, et cetera, to enable the commission. And we suggested changing the capital C to small c.
Okay.
Although I think, that's not totally grammatically correct.
I think that's the way the state rules are.
Yeah, I believe that, like I said, it's
Yeah.
not grammatically correct,
Yeah.
but I believe it's the way the state rules require. And anyway, to appropriately relate the proposed extension, system improvement, or addition to maps of existing facilities currently on file with the commission. And basically, in our thing was just strike currently on file with the commission.
No, I think we're on
I mean, I think it gets back to the same thing we talked
I think
about.
we're on paragraph 14 where you said delete summarizing the utilities projects that were not deemed undertakings pursuant to 8A1B and 8A1C.
Well, I mean, not according to where I was. Okay, well, I think I mentioned that when we talked about the electric side. So D2, 440.9 D2,
Jack, we're on paragraph 14 of staff's comments.
14, we're all the way down there. Okay. First of all, it's just changing capital C to small c in that 10A. And then in summarizing utilities projects that were not deemed undertakings according to 8A1B and 8A1C. The biggest problem we saw there was just the huge volume of those. I mean, one of the reasons why there was a dollar limit put on these projects was to quit, was to avoid being inundated by small projects. But, this would again bring all these small projects and have to be, put in whether they cost $1 or whether they cost $500,000.
Robert, could you get the rule back on the screen?
Yeah,
Yeah, one sec.
that'd be great. Grateful. That's Exhibit A, right? To the
NOPR.
NOPR, yeah.
So I believe the summary that's contemplated there in the last part of that list is referring to I think it's subpart E here. And it's just asking for the total costs of all that stuff that kind of falls below the threshold. It's not asking for any information on the individual projects themselves, just what's the total cost of that chunk of stuff.
Okay, well, I certainly didn't read that in there on my own. No,
Well, that's,
I didn't see anything in part A that says, this is in part E.
Okay, then we can
I
clarify
mean,
that.
maybe all you need to do is say, summarize each of the utilities plan filings pursuant to part 10E or something like that, but we didn't read that in there. I mean, when I read that, I just said, okay, everything that costs less than $1 million, they have to summarize.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. We can clarify that.
Summarizing each of the utilities plan filings. They didn't even, that doesn't even necessarily limit the cost. So, I mean, either drop that or change it to refer to section E for specifics.
So plan filings relates to section C, and then the prior year's filings relates to section B. So there's some flow to this section.
Yeah, just, clarify in there what you mean.
Did you guys just summarize what you just did? I had to print out my own version. I have trouble following along on the screen. Can you just tell me what you were just saying, please? I'm sorry to ask you to repeat, but.
Yeah, Commissioner Hall, Jack was saying that part A, 10A here is a little bit confusing because it almost reads like these are separate requirements. But in actuality, this is kind of just describing what comes later in B, C, and D and E, I think.
Oh, I see.
So the way to correct that is to just reference the subparts up here.
Sure.
So it's not a substantive change. It's more of just
I see.
Better presentation.
Yeah. Better construction. That was a noise.
I guess staff has one more comment about 440. 10, E, F, and G.
Okay, I think some of this also related to possibly the amendments. You know, that they're expecting to amend this annual report ad infinitum through the next year to pick up something they missed on the previous report. Well, I mean, if you want to do that, why not make it a monthly report instead of an annual report? You know, instead of taking this annual report and having to amend it every time something comes up, which will get unwieldy, and you know, be getting all kinds of amendments filed. Maybe instead of an annual report, it should be a monthly report.
Well, how many unplanned filings do the utilities have?
What's that?
I mean, the underlying question there is how many unplanned filings do the utilities have throughout the year?
We don't know. I mean, how many times are you going to fix your car next week, Robert?
Yeah, but we have historical evidence to kind of show a trend.
But you know, I mean, that's leaving it wide open. It might be, you know, it might be that they hit all their planned work in that first annual report. It might be that stuff comes up that they've got to do throughout the year. I mean, it may be anywhere from 0 to 20, 30. I mean, you know, who knows? I mean, that's the problem with leaving it open-ended. You know, in a good situation, hopefully you don't get any amendments.
So, Jack, from a commissioner's standpoint, I don't think it's information that we would necessarily want to review on a monthly basis. It kind of gets into a too much information mode there. And I think that was the thought behind only needing to see it annually. And I'm not quite sure, maybe you can explain a little better why doing it monthly would save work, which is
Well,
what
I mean, I wasn't really saying doing a monthly, but if you're going to require them to amend that annual report every time there's a change, it could end up being monthly. You know, if there's no changes, there's no filing. You're correct. I mean, if there's no changes, you're better off with it being annual. But if they're going to have to amend a report every time they need to, you know, that something comes up that they need a 440 for, depending on how often that is, that could be more than monthly.
So I'm trying to get the distinction between publishing the report and updating the database as you go. And to me, those are two different things, but and it doesn't sound like they're two different things in your mind. So I'm trying to get a better understanding of what you're saying there.
Because, well, you look at it, they file an annual report for this year. They'll say we're going to do projects X, Y, and Z on next year, and they end up doing projects A, B, and C too. That'll show up in the next year's annual report. So rather than filing an amended report when each of those comes in, you know, that you do the best you can with the annual report you file. And then you see where, it takes you. you know, then the next year you catch what you didn't get during, you know, what you didn't get ahead of time.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying, Jack, is it's going to be reported subsequently, so it doesn't need to be amended. The previous years doesn't need to be amended.
That's pretty much my opinion. I
No,
just
I
think
just
that
want to make sure I understand it. That's the way I hear what you're saying.
yeah. I mean, it could get unduly burdensome for both the utility and ourselves if they have to amend a report every time something comes up.
I just want to chime in. This is Nancy with EPE commissioners and Judy, and EPE tends to agree with what Jack is saying about amending the annual report. It could very well become monthly.
And I mean, on top of that, you're going to be getting the 440s. Do you really want an amended annual report to just reiterate what you're going to get in the 440 anyway?
Well, I appreciate the comment, and at this point, it would be my suggestion, but obviously I would defer to Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Fishman to go through the utilities comments on the Rule 440 rather than jump ahead to Rule 592. But please let me know how you would like to proceed.
I mean, I don't think we have that much in. Do we have that much in 545? Yeah.
No, you don't. But I just think conceptually, we're all thinking about 440 now, so it might be good just to stay on that topic. But does anybody else have a thought? Should we move on to 592 with staff or keep 440 going with the utilities?
I guess I just have a question, really. And I think it's for Steve, but I'm not sure, for Commissioner Fishman, maybe for Robert. I don't remember who mentioned it, but someone was saying, I think it was a comment of Steve's related to having a database as opposed to a report. And does it make sense to, to alleviate this problem of monthly amendments of the report, to just have the commission have access to the database so that we can look at whatever we want to look at? I mean, I think we would have access anyhow, but I think I like the option of being able to see information when I want to see it. And I also appreciate, the burden of creating a monthly document when maybe there's not a whole lot to report. So I'm just wondering if it's a question of access to information that just needs a mechanism to employ so that, if the commission wants to look at something, we can, but it doesn't require creating a formal report. If we just have access to a database, ideally, the plan is, and to use our commission advisors to help us think through policy issues and maybe, access the data for that purpose. Does that make sense at all? Just from a systems standpoint?
Well, I think you would have to, whether they have such a data.
Well, correct. It would involve creating a database. But, there has to be some work involved for us to be able to see what we want to see. I completely share the concern that we need to understand the compounding effect of, numerous 440s that end up costing a lot of money and becoming you know, a cost that we would want to have been aware of sooner. So I'm just trying to think of an improvement in the system. Do you have any thoughts on that, Commissioner Fisher?
Well, yeah. Are you getting the echo I'm getting?
Yeah, there's somebody's got two microphones going.
Okay. This sounds better. Is that, I'm going to draw an analogy here to accounting, because this, after all, is accounting. So it's really not an analogy. But at any rate, accounting records, you're booking each transaction as it happens. So you've got the record. And, typically in accounting, on a monthly basis, you put out a report, a monthly statement. But you don't have to. You could do it annually. It's just a matter of when you decide to compile all those transactions into a financial report. And to me, it kind of feels like the same thing here, is you're just compiling the transactions, and at the end of the year, you turn it into a report. And that report gives you the capital expenditures that you may not have captured, that you will not have captured in CCNs or other filings. So that's all that's happening here. That's all that should be happening, and really, in my mind, shouldn't be any more complicated than that. So maybe I'm missing something, and again, in your comments, please let us know if I'm just whiffing on some major concept here.
Mr. Fisher, question.
Yeah.
Don't companies do that sort of thing quarterly?
Yeah, they do. I mean, yeah.
Would that help us here?
Reporting can be on any basis that you want, depending on how often you're going to use it. And I think in this rule, certainly as I was reading it, annually felt like that was often enough. And you're just maintaining a ledger between the beginning of the year and the end of the year as to what actually happened, and just adding up the numbers for all the transaction in those accounts. So I'm still struggling with what Jack's saying, and I may be missing something. But
Well, I mean, here, I don't think the issue is with, with the stuff that happens in the past year, but throughout some of these sections, they talk about forecasting into future years. And I think that's where the issue is, how, I mean, if they know they're going to be a project done next year, fine, but do they need to really keep amending their report every time some project comes up? I mean, I think that if you take out the forecasting into the future year, I think this would be okay.
So my comment to that is, I think we want to get a little more window about what's going to happen in the upcoming year than we may have now. And the idea of the forecasts are never accurate, and we should never pretend they're going to be. But we do want kind of a window of sort of order of magnitude of what kind of expenses would happen there, or at least I would. So again, suggestions to get that window, but make it less burdensome,
Okay,
would be welcome.
I mean, I think what I would say is, if they know, like coming up, say, the end of 2022, they're doing their report. They know what they did this year. If they know projects they're going to do next year, go ahead and list them. but get out of the requirement to requiring them to keep amending the report. And I think that's the problem is the requirement that's looking at them having to amend the report every time it changes.
Yeah. And that might be,
I mean, yes,
that's a valid comment. I guess it's worth looking at carefully.
that will
Getting comments on.
that will give you a look into the future if there is one. But it gets
Well,
out of
there is, because you can't run a business without having budgets.
Yeah.
And they've got budgets for how much they're going to spend on stuff.
But I think it's,
And well, let me finish the thought. And there are going to be contingencies that come up that as a business you don't know about, but having come out of accounting and planning myself, you always have in your forecasting and in your budgeting budget for contingencies. And it could be as simple as just including a budget number for contingencies and then not amending for every project. So it could be something as simple as that. Again, I'm open to all suggestions, but I think you're raising a good issue, Jack, that at least as the forecast goes, every time a project change that we go change the forecast, it's more complicated than that. And I think you raise a good point there that we should maybe revisit exactly how that works.
I mean, the one thing you could say is that you might do is you want an amended report if the total is over $50 million or whatever.
Or if you think there's a significant potential change in the total budget, or if there's a significant new big project. So any suggestions along those lines?
I mean,
Certainly.
I think that you should put a dollar definition with a big project because everybody's idea big is different.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm sorry, I kept looking back, Jack, instead of looking forward. You were talking forecast. So I apologize for being kind of dense.
Judy,
Yes.
Leslie's idea from PNM, just a couple comments on this subject, because, at page 8 of our comments, we do list all of the different ways that the proposed rule would increase reporting requirements. So we did note, as Mr. Sidler was explaining, that there might be possible needs for amending the prospective annual report depending on what changes or unplanned filings. And then also the requirement for amended reports for reports that have already been filed, 440s, would seem to us to probably mean that we would be filing at least one amended report for each 440 as costs change. And I wanted just to briefly respond to Commissioner Fishman's comment about, wanting to have a handle on utility plan spending. And my thought is, and we can certainly address this in our response comments, and I have been doing some research to try to look to see if there's any corollary to what the commission is proposing with this rule in other states. I haven't yet to find anything in other states. So I mean, I think what's happening is that this rule 440 just might not be a place for what you're wanting. And it may be in the ongoing IRP rulemaking, we have submitted comments and we've made verbal comments at the workshops that, the whole IRP process needs to be rethought. And that's why we don't support a lot of the proposed changes to the IRP rule, because it's using the existing rule and trying to turn it into something that frankly probably needs a much more holistic approach. We've talked about the Colorado approach, the Nevada approach, just tweaking and amending our current IRP rule doesn't do that.
Leslie, I'll stop you just because the record in the IRP case is closed. So now this.
Okay, good. No, that's helpful, but I would some of these issues about planning do, perhaps lend themselves to thinking about, how to accommodate that in terms of integrated resource planning. But I appreciate that caution. Thank you, Robert. Sorry.
Judy,
Um,
Commissioner Mike Antonio for comment.
Oh, yeah, I to try to rein the thing in, Commissioners Hall and Fishman, is it okay to have the utilities go through their 440 comments now and not move on to 592? If so, I would have Mike, since he wanted to make a comment, start off with SPS's 440 comments. You can reply to what staff said, obviously, or you can say something new. And then I will do PNM and EPE and gas company. And if there's anyone else, please let me know.
Okay, Judy, should I go?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Judy and Commissioners. Mike D'Antonio with SPS. First of all, I'd like to say we agree with the increases in the cost thresholds for the 440 reporting, the $1 million and $2 million with and even the generation projects, probably 2 million, maybe a little bit low because of the nature of the expenses with generation. We have a general concern about the reporting requirements that will lead to increased costs for our customers and also put more strain on the PRC regulatory staff who is working pretty hard right now. The view on what we call the pre-review of capital expenditures outside of the standard rate case process could result in the commission encroaching into matters that are properly left to the utilities management. It would effectively replace the exercise of judgment by utility with that of the commission staff. Because a utility would continue to have the burden in rate cases of demonstrating entitlement to rate recovery for undertakings that would be subject to such involvement by the commission and staff, the proposed rule would leave the utility and its investors bearing the burden of consequences and risks of decisions made by others. So that is a general overarching concern with the estimated cost issues, which I'll touch on a little bit more. The maintenance, the term maintenance, we feel should be eliminated from the rule and suggested to be replaced by repair or replacement expenditures. The day-to-day maintenance of the type described in the language in the draft rule is not a category of cost typically given rate-based treatment. SPS believes that this change will help align the rule language with the apparent intent of the rule amendment, which appears to be intended to capture capital expenses that are made to either repair or replace existing utility facilities.
Mike, Steve Fishman.
Yes.
Thumbs up. I think repair and replacement might be a really good terminology to use instead. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we thought it might be a good compromise, but subject to review from all parties. Thank you, Commissioner. Also, the proposed Rule 440 would require utilities to file reports at least 45 days prior to construction. This is the comment that we agreed with Jack Sidler and staff. There may be undertakings for projects that are severe weather events, et cetera. So the 45-day threshold may not apply to all. So we just wanted that consideration in that particular rule. And yeah, and I think I'll stop there. I guess one last comment with regards to prospective reporting. I think that it's important to realize that utilities, we are kind of subject to the whim of the economy. There is a lot of uncertainty on, we have to take all customers that come into our service territories. We do not turn down loads. We have to serve them. Projections of economic development, what's going to happen. A lot of those are uncertain. We realize, so trying to actually do filings for prospective years for projects, it becomes very difficult and uncertain. So I just think that the commission should consider that when looking at doing prospective kinds of reporting for the utilities. That I'll end my comments there. Thank you.
I have one question, Mike. You were talking about that we might be substituting commission decision-making for utility
Mhm.
decision-making. I think I know what you're talking about, but I'd like you to describe that more specifically to be sure that we're understanding precisely
Sure.
the concern there.
So, I've got Erica Kane online and also Bobby Jones if they want to jump in here. But I think with regards to if a project, there was that 45-day period to allow projects to be to file, the commission could look at those projects and then determine if there's some kind of change they want to make to that. So it was kind of vague on what the commission would be able to do in that regard before the project actually was actually started construction. So that vagueness would cause maybe the utility to go back and say, hey, we need to change. Either we've got materials ordered for this project, it's going to go, but now we've gotten an order from the commission or a notification that we need to stop. Desist. So it may change our takes the decision making out of our hands, so to speak. That's one example. And Erica, I don't know if others want to chime in on that.
So if our intent is only to just have transparency of information, but not to change your decision making, and the rules provisions do that, that would make you. That's where I'm headed with it. I certainly was never
better for us.
We were going to try and double a second guess every decision on a 440.
Right.
That's kind of why 440 was set up as limited commission review.
Right.
And we don't want to get rid of that for sure. So I guess just to give you some comfort that if there's anything in the language that crosses that line, yeah, let's amend that.
Okay. And Erica, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, quickly, Commissioner, thank you. I think our issue, and I think staff raises this in their comments as well, is in 440.8 D2, there's a reference to the commission taking, quote, appropriate action in response to a 440 filing. And I think that our concern is the ambiguity there of what that might mean and what the scope of that action may be, and could it rise to the level of directing the utility to change a planned project or something of that nature. And so I think, to the extent the intent here is for this rule to remain informational in nature, that particular language, in our view, takes the rule away from informational to something perhaps unintended. And so that is the particular language we have concern with.
Well, I would point out, though, that in the current rule, while the intent is to keep it mostly informational, the current rule allows the commission to call up any particular item where they have questions and examine it. So even now, it seems to me there's an authority there to review, but there's an understanding that that authority is going to be used in very limited and exceptional cases. And I do have to say, I think the commission should retain that authority, but I do think there needs to be a general understanding that we're not going to be sitting here and start reviewing every 440 project. That just undermines the whole purpose of the rule. Am I making sense there in your mind?
Certainly, Commissioner. And I think, to the extent the commission may want to consider some sort of clarifying language to communicate that limited nature of it's a review process, but in terms of directing utility activity or judgment is beyond the scope of the intent here, to the extent maybe there could be some language or some revisions to that term appropriate action to help clarify that. I think that would, at least on SPS's view, would be a good revision.
Have you made a suggestion in your comments yet, or?
Our suggestion was to omit this particular language. So I think in our response comments, we can perhaps provide some alternative suggestions.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the comment.
Mike, do you have anything else?
No, Judy, that's it, Judy, for us.
Okay. So next would be P&M addressing either issues that have already been raised perhaps, but other issues regarding the 440 rule.
Certainly, thank you, Judy. And again, this is Leslie Padilla on behalf of P&M. Also in the workshop are Omni Warner and Jason Jones, both with our distribution planning team and grid modernization. So if you have any specific questions, I think especially on what P&M has been seeing recently in terms of cost increases for equipment and planning horizon times, that kind of thing. They were the ones who helped us prepare our response to just provide that information, that real world information on how utility projects are planned and implemented. Our comments are fairly detailed, so I don't think I'm going to repeat them here. We tried to provide an explanation of every change that we proposed. I would again point folks to the list on page 8, the bulleted list, where we identified all of the new reporting requirements that would arise from the proposed rule. And as we noted at the outset of our comments, it's interesting that back in 1988, when the commission, just shortly after the commission first put this rule in place, they actually revised it shortly after that to make things simpler. And they were aware that they had already imposed requirements such as a 30-day advance filing that they wanted to simplify at that point. I would also point out on the cost recovery provisions, which we've already talked about, that one argument that we make is that the denial of cost recovery for any project that might come in at 150% over cost. I don't think it would violate due process in not allowing a utility to support its costs. And also, it's one piece of evidence. And so, as I wrote, that the single fact that costs may have exceeded estimates is not proof of anything, especially in this environment of rapidly increasing costs. I think that's all. We also, provided some information again about cost increases and about our record in terms of meeting estimates. Now, in the aggregate, I point out on page 11, in the aggregate, P&M did very well in terms of meeting its estimates, but project by project, it was very different. And it also included the fact that 11 projects were significantly under budget, but the rule doesn't give utilities anything for for doing better than expected. So in that respect, we consider the rule punitive and needs to be maybe rethought in that regard. So that's all I have, and appreciate the opportunity to comment at the workshop, and we certainly will look forward to providing response comments. And as I said, the more we learn about the commission's intent in drafting some of these provisions, I think the better we can provide constructive feedback in response comments.
Thank you, Leslie. Commissioners Fishman or Hall, do you have Robert, any particular questions for P&M?
No, those are all worthwhile comments. They're going to all be carefully considered. So thank you for raising those points, and they are constructive comments, which is much appreciated.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Nancy Burns and whoever else from EPE who would like to comment on any of the 440 issues.
Good afternoon. It's Nancy Burns for EPE, Commissioner Fishman and Hall and Judy and everyone else. With me, I have Darcy Welch. She helps us put together some of the 440s for the transmission distribution, and Nate Castillo, who's a case manager. And I know we're running out of time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I think that we have not had a chance to go through everybody's comments with a fine-tooth comb, but we have reviewed them at a high level. There's nothing that staff has said that we disagree with, or SPS or PNM. So I think we're all fairly aligned. I do think there are, getting to the real point of these rule revisions, maybe some further conversations, as Leslie has suggested, might be helpful. Because there are other avenues, minimum data requirements for our rate case filings. We worked on we had an entire process to streamline the minimum data requirements. And that whole thing sort of got set aside, but we had worked on that for a long time. EP had suggested perhaps a CCN rule if there's more specifics and transparency around what actually gets certificated at the commission. We have no rule on CCN. I want to make a couple small points in terms of the appropriate action comments. I think PNM and SBS had brought that up. Some of the comments that staff had made about the 14-day notice period and amending the 440, that is a huge issue when we have a project planned, and if different action will be ordered within 14 days, because everything is ordered, things are ready to go by day 14. So we had suggested some changes to that language. Also, some of we had suggested in our initial comments removing some of the annual reporting requirements. We saw them redundant. We didn't really understand what they were getting at. Commissioner Fishman, it's unclear to us when you speak, when you talk about reconciling plant accounts. There's plant in service accounts, and then there's the construction work in progress accounts. So those are very different numbers at the end of a year. What numbers the commission would be looking for. So there's not a lot of time. I want to leave time for the gas company and any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gas company at this point can comment on Rule 440.
Thank you, Commissioners. So this is Brian Haverly on behalf of New Mexico Gas Company. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent, thank you. So we have a few comments. Number one, we appreciate the Commission doing this and taking a look at these. We are supportive of raising the increases as we filed various information to the Commission. Inflation over the years has crept up, so it's nice to have a little bit more. We were reporting on quite a few projects at the $100,000 level that we would never have reported on earlier. So that we fully support that part of this. The annual reports, we have a few comments on, probably like most of the other utilities. For us specifically, since we need time to aggregate all the information, we'd like an annual report due more in line with our April filings. That makes a lot of sense to us because number one, gets us the ability to get all of our past information together and put together and deliver to the Commission with accuracy. And because you want future projects, the way that New Mexico Gas Company's business generally works is we're doing a lot of planning in the early part of the year for the rest of the year, because we're doing most of our projects when there's low usage, right? So we want to time it when we don't have high usage on our system. So we're finalizing that stuff in the first 2 to 3 months of the year. So you would get much more and much better information from us in terms of what our proposed projects would be going forward for the future year if we could file it in April rather than if we file it in December, because we have not finalized those type of things by December 31st for the upcoming year. So we think that moving that deadline would be helpful, and it might be helpful for other utilities. I have no idea how they operate, but from the gas side, that is just how the general flow goes with how we conduct business. The other thing that we want to just kind of mention based on what I'm hearing is we would like to have a little more clarity on when updates would be needed for the annual reports, because it's in the way that it's been discussed today, it sounds like it could be a double filing, like we're filing a 440 plus we're filing an annual report update, and we're just trying to get our minds around how the commission would like information. So we're happy to put more information and response comments as everybody's kind of talked about with staff. Staff has brought up a few issues that we'd be happy to respond to, give the commission more information from how the gas company operates and how we could, how we're doing things based on some of this stuff. But we would also encourage more communication, because what we're hearing today, at least from what those of us that are sitting here listening to it, is that there's lots of good ideas on how we might get more information in the commission. It's what does the commission ultimately want, and how can we best facilitate doing that in the most efficient way?
Thank you very much. Commissioners Fishman and Hall, do you have any questions or maybe comments? It seems like several of the utilities are asking the same question: what does the commission want? I think it's pretty clear from the NOPR, but this is just, my read of it is that we want the 440s to be as accurate as can be when you file them, and then let us know if there are changes, and perhaps explain why there were such huge changes if they were over budget. But maybe the commissioners can chime in as to how they read it.
So Judy, I agree. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's just clarity and simplicity. And I think all the commenters have raised some issues worth considering about how we can take this cut that we've currently got and streamline it and make sure that it doesn't have some unintended consequences. And so I've found the comments on the Rule 440 very helpful today. And I think we can find that balance, that we can make sure that it's a minimal administrative burden. Because what it really comes down to is we get these separate 440s, but at no point is it really consolidated into what I would call management reporting that the commission could look at and sort of see the whole picture. And so I think that's part of what we're trying to do with this rule as well. But I think I think a lot of really good issues have been raised about where it might create some obstacles. And I think all of them are addressable and fixable. And I think we can do it in a way that minimizes the administrative burden. So we're going to look really closely at all the comments you put together about that. I haven't had a chance to read the comments yet. I'm just kind of getting a general picture, but great issues that have been raised today. So thank you.
If there's no one else who wants to comment on Rule 440, I would move on to Rule 592 and start off with staff's comments regarding Rule 592. Jack? Is there anyone from staff present who could comment on their?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find the mute.
And maybe Robert, would you do the screen sharing again? So we can see Rule 592?
Okay. Hello?
Yes, are you there?
Okay.
Could you proceed?
Okay, our thing started with 10A1. And it's the location of the transmission line in the map. And we just added things in both a suitable electronic format, like a PDF, and as a paper copy with a scale not exceeding 1 inch equals 5 miles, just to keep it reasonably readable. I thought that was a pretty straightforward change.
Okay.
And then we go into 10G1, and that lists out important environmental impacts. I don't know, what's the screen showing right now?
10G1.
I'm okay. Okay, there we are. Okay, basically it says important environmental values include but are not limited to, and it basically just lists out all of these things. And we'd like to see all those things, preservation of air quality, water quality, land use, basically lined out in a lettered list. Like A, preservation of air quality, B, water quality, C, land uses, etc. Just because in writing testimony and in referencing these things, it's a lot easier if we can say 10G1A or 10G1D or whatever, rather than having to, ferret it out amongst an unidentified list, basically. I mean, I don't think that's a huge substantive, it's just changing it from an unordered list to an ordered list.
Okay, and is that it for your comments on 592?
We had a couple others down here. 15B, you had taken out a reference, will extend for a distance of over 1 mile in the length of the transmission line, the following, and you'd taken out of the old rule with a voltage of 230 kV or greater. And we suggested you leave that in just for clarity's sake, because there are some jurisdictions where transmission lines are 46, 69, or 115 kV. So just specifying that they're only interested in 230 kV or better makes it that there's not going to be a question about what the voltage level is.
Yeah, I see. And anything else you want to add about Rule 592?
Okay, 15C, they're talking about location control and American Indian tribes or land contiguous. We just felt that there was sort of an unclarity about how this really thing, because our location approval rules and that don't apply on the reservations, of course. But I felt that sort of what 19 as it is was saying was sort of, was sort of ambiguous and difficult, difficult. It sort of sounds like the commission's trying to act like our rule applies on the reservations. The reservations may have their own rules, but it's not ours necessarily. And we just thought that, that needs to be rethought somehow to make that a little bit more clear about what that particular paragraph is saying. But I don't know how, I don't know how to change it. I'm just saying it should be made more clear.
I think it just says shall consult. And that was in the current rule. Robert, you want to highlight that? See, it's not a change.
Okay, well, I was looking at this, not necessarily comparing it with the current rule. But at any rate, we just felt that that might be a point where that could be clarified a little better. But I don't know how to do it.
Okay, and then on to the,
And then
15.
15E,
yeah,
I think, okay, it was filing a report, but this was the safe harbor issue, and it said file a report pursuant to 440.8.A1F. And part of what we think is that the safe harbor thing and with the report, it does, there's no guidance on what they want to see either in the report or how the report is formatted.
all right. Well,
And we thought that it just should be, that this report should be specified in this section of Rule 592. I mean, what needs to be done.
Well, Jack, I think that kind of comes down to what the 440 form looks like, because what this is saying is basically file a 440. So I think the underlying issue is the form.
Yeah. So, I mean, some ways you just need to get them tied together. And of course, we need a 440 form too. Or at least an updated one.
has anyone provided in their comments an updated 440 form?
Well, I mean, in order to create the form, I think we need the rule in pretty much finished condition. Because the form is going to mirror the requirements of the rule. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that the existing form is 100% off, but I think it does need to be spruced up and maybe improved a little bit at least.
Well, I'm sure we would be open to suggestions on the form, but I hear what you're saying.
So
You can't finalize the form until the rule is finalized.
pretty much, or very close to being finalized.
Jack,
Uh-huh.
I know I would very much welcome any suggestions that you have regarding the form prior to us finalizing the rule, because your suggestions may influence us and lead to a better rule. So if you have ideas, don't be shy. Let us know.
Okay, we sure will, but you know, like I said, I hadn't even worried about the form yet because I figured we needed to get to the contents first.
Yeah.
But and then paragraph 15E1, commission staff may file a statement. It said shall file a statement on the factual and legal sufficiency of that. I mean, one of the things we were looking at is commission staff may not have any specific knowledge of factual or legal sufficiencies. And, you know, if they don't, they shouldn't have to file a report. I mean, all this would be saying is staff has to file a report to say that, you know, that they don't have, I mean, none of us that review this stuff are lawyers. And we may not necessarily know specific facts about it or what, you know, whether things are factual or not, because we're not, you know, we're not on the ground wherever this is happening. And then, but to get on down to it, paragraph E1 said public utilities that claim safe harbor, etc. And then there's a number 1, commission staff shall file a statement. Our main thing was we think that the number 1 should come out because there's nothing further. You know, we thought that it should go, you know, 440.8 A1 FNMAC, period. Commission staff shall file a statement rather than having it broken out into a sub list of 1. And I think that was our main point here, was that you just have a sub list of 1, and that just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and Robert and commissioners can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the intention of staff filing a statement was that it's subsequent to the public utility filing their claim. So it would be in response to whatever the utility filed. Isn't that correct, Robert?
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm thinking there is we may have no basis to refute what the utility's filing.
Well, I mean, every time the utility files something, if there's something missing, you can ask for more information. You know, that's the way it is with all kinds of applications.
I think the specific concern was basically just the legal sufficiency and whether it just that because it says commission staff shall file, and that the commission staff filing may not have the legal training required to necessarily comment on the legal sufficiency full stop. If it were like this, the sufficiency with regards to commission rules. I think that would be one thing, but this seems to be calling for like a specific legal opinion that the staff making the recommendation might not necessarily have the qualifications to render.
I mean, that might work out better if you just took out the words legal sufficiency. Because the people that review this stuff are basically the three of us in the engineering bureau. And, you know, I've got my own opinion on what the law should say, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm right.
So
Yeah.
I have a question. Doesn't staff consult with their lawyers on things like this?
Well, then we'd have to have a lawyer that filed the report on the legal sufficiency. I mean, I'm not going to file a report on legal sufficiency saying that David Black told us this,
Yeah.
because I can't support it on my own.
Yeah. Well, staff legal is part of staff. I mean, it could be that.
I mean, my thought on that would, the legal sufficiency regarding the safe harbor claim, I mean, that might be more appropriately in the OGC's office to advise you on the legal sufficiency. Because this is essentially advising you. And it's the OGC's office responsibility to advise you.
Steve or Robert, do you guys have I don't know what was in mind in the wording of this.
I'll let the lawyers hash this one out. But I think the idea here was we wanted to have clarity early on the legal sufficiency. So, you know, whether it's staff's attorneys or whether it's OGC who does it, OGC that does it, you know, I think the attorneys can speak to that in a way I can't.
I mean, this point may not be that big a deal, because in my 14 and a half years with the commission, I think this case with the solar case up there in Rio Pintada or wherever it is up there, was the first time I've ever seen them try to use safe harbor. You know, so it may not be
that, Jack.
What's that?
Because that was an interesting point, Jack, because some of the comments from the utilities on this part was concerned that this would create, you know, a massive filing burden, as if safe harbor is being claimed all the time.
I think if this is Nancy with EP, I think if I can clarify that, EPE did not comment on Rule 592 or the filing burden, Robert, but I do think that some of the other commenters said that unless the safe harbor filings conform to the Rule 440 requirements, there may be additional filings. So that there shouldn't just be a 440 filing if there's a safe harbor exception. That the 440 should be safe harbor plus the 440 requirements, if that makes sense. That's how I read some of the comments, and they said that would create the extra filings.
Yeah, because not every 440 filing invokes the Safe Harbor Act.
Right.
And there's only very few specific instances where that Safe Harbor Act applies in Rule 440. And most of the 440s don't meet them. But at any rate, I mean, our concern was mainly, you know, including the legal sufficiency part in our requirement.
Well,
So-
thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, so I was going to say, that sounds like it's pretty easy to address, Robert, just by making clear 440, I mean, the safe harbor provisions only apply in those limited cases where it's relevant.
At this point, I'd like to move on to PNM and SPS and EPE and gas company making comments on the 592 rule, if possible. I know we'd like to finish by 3 as soon as or as close to 3 as possible. So Leslie Padilla, are you available to comment on Rule 592?
Yes, Judy, thank you. And really, I would just affirm what had previously been explained, that our concern about 592 might require a utility to file a 440 for any project falling under the safe harbor provision, regardless of whether the Rule 440 thresholds applied. And I guess I would also point out, I'm not familiar with instances in which PNM has felt that the safe harbor applied, but if it did, I'm not sure, it would ever come to the attention of the commission, because that would be the purpose of safe harbor, right? You wouldn't need to file for location control. So it's kind of like proving a negative. But again, I don't know instances in which we've affirmatively made the decision, except for a couple of recent cases.
Yeah.
The Arroyo Solar, I think. So
yeah.
Otherwise,
Yes.
I don't know that we would even have discussions about it if we've made a judgment that safe harbor applied, because the rule says that no location control is necessary. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
I have a quick question. So you're saying if you think safe harbor applies, you never tell us, you just act upon it, right?
Well, that's the way that's the way I read the rule, Judy. I'm not familiar with specific instances in which PNM has assessed that safe harbor did apply. I'm just reading the way the rule reads. If a utility did believe safe harbor applied, then you wouldn't need to seek location control approval.
Right. And I think recently PNM, though, has, in the location control case, stated why they're not seeking location approval based upon safe harbor.
Okay.
So PNM affirmatively stated that in that case that you were mentioning.
Yes. Yes.
But I do see what you're saying, that the way the rule is written now, there probably have been times when they thought that and never said anything. And
Hi,
just,
if I may, Ms. Padilla, I could actually pull up an example right now and show, if you would like, of PNM's filing 1253. And they do include, it's a 440 filing, and they did include a statement on safe harbor, kind of like what the rule is setting up, but maybe not exactly.
Right. And I, to that point, Mr. Lundin, I do think that we have or would, if a project for which we were claiming safe harbor, met the thresholds of Rule 440, we would seek 440 approval, I believe. So yes, this is, I'm familiar with this one. Yes.
Yeah, just
Exactly. Thank you.
but I think that's a good example of kind of what the rule might achieve, that a safe harbor statement like that PNM filed last year would be something that becomes commonplace. So I think the part of the intent with that edit to 592 is just to try to catch things that might, fall through the cracks, and just, apprise the commission of what's going on.
If those projects otherwise met the applicable thresholds of Rule 440.
Well, that's a good question. And you're right. I don't think it's clear in the way it's written. But what's your opinion on that? Are you saying that you don't think we would need to know safe harbor claims about projects that don't meet the threshold? Or you don't have an opinion? You just want clarity?
I think we'd like clarity. And I think if there are certain thresholds in Rule 440 that, that the commission has decided trigger reporting, then I think, although I'll discuss this internally with PNM, that those same thresholds would apply to any projects for which we're claiming safe harbor.
And Judy, this is Nancy again with EPE. I don't have any further comments on Rule 592, but in my reading through of staff's comments, I think staff's recommended edit addresses that and clarifies that issue. That was my first reading of it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
SPS, do you have any comments regarding Rule 592?
So this is Eric, came from SPS. So we had a similar comment to PNM that, we just wanted to see clarity on whether the intent was to file a 440 for any safe harbor claim or just those that would otherwise qualify. This conversation has been helpful, and I think it may be helpful to get some additional clarity from the commission and for purposes of response comments in terms of if what is intended by the proposed language is to provide or have a vehicle through which the commission can gain visibility into claims of safe harbor and get additional factual information. I'm wondering if perhaps the 440 reporting is not the greatest fit. And if as staff was saying in its comments on 592, maybe there needs to be some specific process that's specific to 592 to the extent the intent is to capture any safe harbor claim and wanting to gain visibility into any safe harbor claim. Maybe it doesn't, for smaller projects, that don't qualify, they wouldn't get a 440 report, but there would be something the commission would want the utility to file to provide enough background information. If what is meant by the language factual and legal sufficiency is that the commission wants enough information to have some level of assurance that the safe harbor, there's some provision within safe harbor that is actually applicable, that maybe the 440 process is not the right process for that, or reporting is not the right process for that. And maybe some amendments need to happen to what is right now E1 in that section of 592 we're discussing to gain that information. So I think for our purposes, for response comments, we didn't comment on that specific provision E1 in our initial comments, but it would be helpful for us for response comments to know exactly kind of what the ideal reporting would look like on safe harbor for the commission, so we could maybe suggest some revisions there and kind of reconcile these issues.
Oh, so that's interesting. So I hear I believe I hear what you're saying is if the commission wants information on all safe harbor projects, regardless of thresholds, then perhaps the reporting wouldn't cross-reference 440 and would have its own report.
Yes, and I think that would address Jack's concern about, attempting to use the 440 reporting for this issue then creates the need to maybe modify the form to conform to that. But if what is intended here is to just have safe harbor reporting, for lack of a better word, maybe there's something just specific to that type of reporting that doesn't need to be referencing 440 and that can be specific to that. And then we don't have these confusion of issues, if you will.
I know. And I guess it's confusing because some safe harbor claims are included currently in 440 reports. So I see where the confusion started, and not sure 100% right now of the solution. Robert and commissioners, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I can just say that just to kind of reorient everyone. What the 440 rule says is that the utility shall file a report to accomplish a few certain goals, and that, to basically explain the character of the undertaking, the purpose, the means by which it's going to be realized, the estimated cost. So it's a few basic things. And then there are no thresholds in that basic reporting requirement. It's the subparts of it which explain the types of different 440 reports. So the way that 592 and 440 would interact would be, in my reading, is that every time the utility would claim safe harbor, they would file a 440 report. And I hear that may not be, the most efficient means to collect that information, but that's kind of the way it was proposed here, and we appreciate the comments on it.
And maybe we can try to provide more clarity too. Gas company, do you have any comments regarding 592?
Commissioners, Ms. Amer, no, the gas company does not have any comments on 592. Thank you.
And Nancy, I heard you say that you had no further comments regarding 592. Maybe she left.
No, I'm here. Sorry. That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It's just the one issue that's been raised here, and we didn't make any comment on it on our initial comments. I hadn't realized what Robert had said, that had been the intent, to use 440 to file safe harbor.
Okay. And Commissioners Fishman and Hall, I believe we could conclude the workshop unless you have anything else you would like to mention at this point.
I'm good. Great input. Thank you all. Very, very helpful.
Yeah, I have no further comments, Judy. I think it's been a really productive conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the comments received, written, verbal, and we can take them back and work on the rule and make it a better product.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I would like to conclude this workshop in case number 21-00177 UT.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you,
Bye.
commissioners.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.